Planning Board meeting Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 6, 2023, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Second, on January 6, 2023, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 6, 2023, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up to members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and you'll be brought into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and you will be required to provide your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Okay, roll call, please.
Hold on one second. He's not here. Mr. Cristiano.
Present.
Mr. Greenfield.
Here.
Mr. Husser.
Here.
Mr. Seaman.
Here.
Ms. Talente.
Here.
Mr. Tannenhouse. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, here.
Thank you. Councilman Gazier.
Here.
Mr. Kyle.
Here.
Mr. Mercer.
Here.
Thank you. And Chairman Bavai.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All righty, great. Okay, we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then a moment of silence for our troops serving both home and abroad. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to
To the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God,
God,
indivisible,
visible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any minutes?
We have no minutes this evening.
Any vouchers?
I have no vouchers this evening.
Any correspondence?
Yes, I do.
All righty.
Mr. Simon, the attorney for case number SP 1102, AASTHW Property LLC, which is on tonight's agenda. He's asked that that be please carried to the board's March 2nd meeting with no further notice.
Okay. Okay. Any resolutions?
Well, I
Oh,
just
wait,
need to make,
we're
I
not
just need to
done.
make the announcement for that. Let me just, okay, the application, AASTHW Property LLC, case SP-1102. And Eileen, which night are we?
March the 2nd, our next meeting.
Okay, the application will be carried to the board's March 2nd, 2023 meeting. That is a virtual meeting beginning at 7:00 p.m. The instructions on how to access the meeting will be available on the township's website. All documents associated with the hearing are available on the website and for physical inspection at the planning department during normal business hours. There will be no further notice to property owners.
Thank you. I also emailed all the members ordinance 23-5. It's an ordinance of the Township of Howell clarifying implementing ordinance 022-24. The board needs to comment on consistency with the master plan tonight because it's up for public hearing and adoption on Tuesday with the council.
Okay. So does
Mr. Chair,
anyone
unless
have,
anyone has any questions, if you want to just take a motion.
yep. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Make motion.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse,
Yes.
Councilman Gager,
Yes.
Mr. Kyle,
Yes.
and Chairman Bavai.
Yes.
Motion carries. And that's all the correspondence I have this evening.
Thank you. Okay, any resolutions?
No resolutions.
Okay, so we'll move on to submission waivers. Case number SP 1111, Comets Inc. for a preliminary and final major site plan.
Just give me 1 second. I don't see the attorney for that case.
Who's the
I believe
attorney?
I believe it's Sal Alfieri.
I think Dante may be covering for him tonight, but I also don't see him. I can text him really quick.
Yeah, I don't see Dante either. And I don't see John Plaskanka.
Dante just sent me a message that he's trying to get on now. He just had a little difficulty.
Okay, so I'll give him a second. No.
Looks like he's in the attendees now, Eileen.
I got him. Thank you.
No problem.
Here he is.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Technical difficulties. How's everyone?
Good, thanks.
Okay, you can go ahead, Mr. Alfieri.
Hi, Ron. Dante Alfieri on behalf of the applicant. We're here tonight seeking a few waivers. I think we reviewed Laura's report. And two of the items we're going to provide, which is item I and item Q on the checklist.
Ron, do you want to swear me in?
Just one moment. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Laura Newman, Neumann. So in short, Mr. Chairman, we have a January 12th, 2023 review letter. I did have the opportunity to speak to Mr. Alfieri's office earlier today to go over the waivers. In addition, John Plaskanka, the engineer for the project, did provide me with a memo also agreeing to provide items J through P on a subsequent plan revision. So with those would be provided, as well as the woodlands management plan. And he had noted that the natural resource inventory report was actually included within their EIS. So if you're in our report, essentially items I through Q will be provided. So with that, I take no exception to the granting of the balance of the waivers for the purposes of deeming the application complete.
Okay. So then I will entertain a motion.
I'll make motion.
I'll make second.
So moved.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Tannenhouse,
Yes.
Councilman Gager,
Yes.
Mr. Kyle,
Yes.
and Chairman Bavai.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate your time.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Take care.
Okay. Next up. Oh, okay. Next up is case number 1085, AAFFHW Properties LLC, Foreman. This is the Whispering Woods settlement and remand for preliminary and final site plan approval.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to recuse myself from this application.
Okay,
Somebody just give me a text when the next one's on, all right?
you got
Sure.
it.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, thanks.
Give me 1 second.
Okay, Mr. Simon, if you just want to enter your appearance.
Sure. Good evening. Good to be before this board. Rob Simon from the firm of Herald Law, here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I could just sort of give a brief history of where we've been and where we are and what we are tasked with tonight, I think it would be helpful to the board, members of the public, the applicant, and everybody. As
Right.
everyone may recall, this application originally came to the board. The applicant was seeking preliminary and final site plan approval with some ancillary design waiver relief. The board denied the application. The applicant filed an action in lieu of prerogative writs challenging the board's decision in Superior Court. Prior to the Superior Court holding hearings and issuing a decision, the parties entered into settlement negotiations. The board approved a settlement agreement which permitted the applicant to come back for what we call a Whispering Woods hearing. Whispering Woods is just the name of the court case that establishes the procedural process. That application involved, or that proposal involved some modifications of the originally denied plan, such as the erection of a sound barrier wall, reorientation of buildings, and some tractor trailer parking, and a few other things that the applicant felt would be a benefit to some of the residential neighbors. The board did approve the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement didn't approve the application, but it permitted the board to hear the application at a hearing, at a public hearing. Upon hearing the application and taking testimony from the public, the board ultimately denied that settlement application as well, and I was directed to proceed with the litigation. That, in fact, did happen. The court, Judge Acquaviva, ruled against the board and held that the applicant had complied with its statutorily required burdens of proof, with the exception of the design waiver relief, which wasn't really addressed because the board had denied the application on other grounds. So Judge Acquaviva remanded the matter back to the board simply to consider the design waiver relief, not to talk about traffic or the grave sites or environmental issues. The judge had ruled against the board on all of those things. Subsequent to that decision, I re-engaged the applicant in settlement discussions, and the applicant / plaintiff did agree to return to what was the previous settlement plan, which included the sound barrier and the reorientation of the buildings, rather than moving forward in the first instance with the original plan that didn't have any of that the judge basically just remanded for the consideration of the two design waivers. So what we have tonight is I've worked out language that's mutually acceptable to the plaintiff and myself with a settlement agreement that the board members have. Essentially what that settlement agreement does is just say that they're going to represent that plan that had been previously denied, the settlement plan with the sound walls. And if the board denies it again, then they would move forward with the plan that the judge remanded, which it was the original plan that was denied, where we're just looking at a couple of design waivers. So the first task that the board has tonight is to vote on whether it wants to hear the settlement proposal in a hearing. And that's number one. So I would ask the board, and if your board has any questions regarding the settlement agreement that was circulated, the draft agreement, you can certainly ask. But as I said, the agreement basically says they are going to represent that second plan that we saw at the last settlement conference. So, Mr. Chairman, we would need a motion to either approve or deny the settlement agreement at this juncture.
Okay, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion for, Ron, correct me, but if I say I am approving the settlement agreement, that means we're hearing the modified plan.
Correct.
Okay, and that's my motion.
I'll second Brian's.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Councilman Gager,
Yes.
Mr. Kyle,
Yes.
Mr. Mercer,
Yes.
and Chairman Bavai.
Yes.
Okay, so
Motion
Mr.
carries.
Chairman, what we'll do now is we'll mark that as one of the board's exhibits so that it's part of the record. I also just want to speak briefly about what it is you're going to hear now, what the court did, and what our focus is. So let me just start with what you're going to hear. The applicant is going to put on testimony which goes through the differences from the first plan that was denied, the one that did not have the sound wall or the reorientation, go through all the changes, why the changes were made, why they think it's a benefit. There is still some relief, particularly relief associated with some of the things that they're doing to put the sound wall up and a few other things. They're going to put some testimony on as to why they think they should be granted relief. I want to speak a little bit about what the court did and what we are bound by. The court has simply rejected the traffic arguments. The board, has no choice. It has to listen to what the court said. So while there may be concern about the traffic that's generated, and we specifically, linked it to the ingress and egress, the court has rejected that. So the court is not going to entertain or permit us to revisit traffic generation on the site. The court also rejected our environmental arguments with regard to the areas that need to be remediated. So again, in that instance, the court is not going to, accept us revisiting that issue that it has already ruled upon. The same thing with regard to the existence of the grave sites. The court has rejected that. So it's a very narrow focus that we have, and it's limited to, do they comply with our site plan requirements? And where they don't, do we think they've satisfied their burden of proof? And they're going to speak directly to that tonight. But our inquiry is limited by the court's decision. It's not your own decision to limit it, but it's the court's decision, and we have no choice but to follow the decision that the court has issued. So we are limited by the court to listening to the changes, reviewing those changes. Do they comply with the ordinance? And if they don't comply, is there a benefit that to the planning on the site? And they're going to go through that. But all of those other areas, the court has specifically told us in a written opinion, are not areas that we can revisit. And again, if the board denies this, then we have to follow what the court said in its opinion, which is the original. We have to then immediately hear the original proposal again and limit our discussion only to the 2 design waivers that are necessary. It's not an invitation to revisit anything. It's very limited to the 2 design waivers associated with that application. So it may be that we hear 1 proposal tonight and approve it. It may be that we hear 2 proposals tonight, but the scope of what we hear and how we can participate and the testimony that we can take from the public is limited by what the court has told us. And it's those parameters. With that, Mr. Chairman, if anyone has any questions of me, certainly, ask away. Otherwise, I think Mr. Simon can begin his presentation.
Any board members have any questions? Okay, Mr. Simon.
Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Cuchero. And certainly I concur with Ron's summary as to what brought us here and the charge of the board going forward with regard to a Whispering Woods hearing. Just by way of some housekeeping, I believe that we have provided to the board an updated list of exhibits as marked, and I think it ended in terms of the applicant's exhibits as A31. So Ron, I believe that the settlement agreement should be marked as A32, unless I'm off.
Well, we were marking it as our own exhibit, as
okay.
a B exhibit.
That's fine. So
Yeah.
That would be, what would that exhibit be then? Would that be B5?
Yeah, I think that's the next B exhibit, correct, Eileen?
Yes.
Yes, B5.
Very good. And then I presume that this board has jurisdiction certainly to hear this Whispering Woods hearing, and that the exhibit list that I just referred to is part of the record of the proceedings.
Yes.
So with that, and your attorney, Mr. Cuchero, gave an excellent summary of what we are here for with regard to a Whispering Woods hearing and to demonstrate the changes from the prior plan. So we intend to place on the record and present the testimony this evening of Jeremy Lang, the applicant representative and a professional engineer and a professional planner, as well as Christine Cafone, the professional planner of record on the project, again, identifying the changes to the application and the site plan as part of and consistent with the settlement. And to the extent necessary, as again mentioned by Mr. Cachero, justification for any relief required of the board associated with the changes to the application in furtherance of the settlement. We certainly have available other professionals on behalf of the applicant, should their testimony be required, including the civil engineer of record, the traffic engineer of record, the architect of record, the environmental scientist of record, and certainly as needed, we can certainly present their testimony, but we're going to initially rely on the testimony that's going to be presented by Mr. Lang. So unless there's any other further questions of the applicant, of the board, excuse me, I'd like to have Mr. Lang sworn in, and I would get him qualified.
Okay, Mr. Lang, is he on camera?
Yes, he
Yes.
is.
Oh, okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
It's Jeremy, Jeromie, Lang, Lange.
Okay, Mr. Simon, in what capacity is Mr. Lang testifying tonight?
So Mr. Lang is a representative of the applicant. As I stated in my preliminary remarks, he's also a professional engineer and a professional planner. And what he is going to do is walk through, for the benefit of the board and the public, the changes to the site plan and identifying any relief that may be needed incident to those changes. And then after that, we'll go to Christine Cafone, our professional planner, to provide testimony, whether it's, I believe there's one or two variances that are required, as well as some exception/waiver relief.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Mr. Lang.
Thank you.
So,
Good evening.
So Mr. Lang, you are a professional engineer and a professional planner?
Yes, by background, I am, but tonight I'm testifying in my capacity as Director of Development for Active Acquisitions, who is a related entity to the applicant entity.
Thank you. And you were present at the beginning of this hearing when Mr. Cachero and myself spoke to the scope of this Whispering Woods hearing and what is anticipated by way of testimony, correct?
Yes, and I'm ready to present that testimony.
Okay, why don't you proceed then? Thank you.
So I'm going to begin, excuse me, with Exhibit A19, which is the site plan exhibit. That's coming up before you here. It's dated September 1st. It was prepared by Collier's Engineering Design. So I want to jump right in and talk about what is really the primary change. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner of this exhibit, you'll see a smaller building. It's labeled as Building B. It's in the northeast corner of the site. That building, essentially between the original plan that was denied and what is now the settlement plan, has been flipped from east to west. So along the north-south axis. So what used to be facing east is now facing west and vice versa. So more specifically, the truck loading docks and the whole truck court area used to be on the east side of Building B. We flipped that. Now that truck court is located internal in the site between buildings A and B. And then in its place on the east side, we now have the passenger vehicle parking that used to be in the center of the site. So that is the major change. There's a series of other smaller changes that kind of come off of that, but that is, by far the biggest change on the plan. The other somewhat significant change is the addition of a sound wall. So you'll see where we're indicating here along essentially the easterly property line. It's really the side yard area, with an exception of a piece of it that punctures into the Michael Curtin Lane front yard. But other than that, it's located in the side yard. And the purpose of this is to provide an additional visual and sound attenuation buffer between us and the neighboring residential property. So that's the other somewhat major change here.
And that's along the eastern side, as you referenced on the exhibit.
Correct. That easterly side, you can see it here in this kind of faint brown line. The little hand is kind of showing you where it's at, but it's along that side yard. It does go into the required front yard of Michael Curtin Lane, which is of note. I'll get to that in a short bit. Now, so a few other more ancillary things I want to go over. In flipping the building, it changes obviously the truck circulation. So we have reconfigured the drive aisles to direct the trucks to the truck court now located in the center of the site as it relates to building B. That means the drive aisles now that service the parking on the east side do not have to be 30 feet anymore. Now they can be 25 feet under the ordinance. So that has been reduced to 25 feet, the parking area itself, as well as the driveway leading to it. The truck court itself has expanded by 5 feet. It went from 65 feet to 70 feet deep. Purpose of that was to help with the truck circulation. By putting the truck court in the middle, it does change the circulation. As you can see, we've got two different entry points to the truck court, one on the north side and one on the southwest portion. That extra 5 feet just assists with that circulation. Another thing that's really not a change, but something I want to address, we did provide curb ramps at least every 65 feet in the parking areas and at all the relevant driveway intersections, I should say. We are not providing curb ramps along the drive aisles that aren't associated with parking or that aren't at an intersection. The reason for that is it's not part of the pedestrian circulation plan. And generally mid-block crossings are discouraged because of safety concerns. What I want to focus on now is the buffer. So I'm going to switch exhibits now to A18. And on this plan, you'll see there's two substantial buffers proposed, one on the left, one on the right, or west and east. The one on the west is identical to the original site plan. That's a farmland buffer. There's been absolutely no change to that whatsoever. The one on the right, the buffer is very similar. It's almost not changed. There was a little bit of changing of the berm, but the big addition here is that sound wall. So not only do we have the sound wall I described earlier, but we continue to have the landscape buffer that we always had in this entire side yard area. So, now we're going from just the landscape buffer to the landscape buffer and the sound wall. So nothing was lost in adding the sound wall. The sound wall is an add-on, additional means of buffering our operation to the adjacent residential lot. That sound wall, just to give you a little specifics on it, will be a sound transmission class 30 sound wall. And that has to do with how much sound it can absorb. It's a kind of a national standard rating. It'll be an earth tone in color. So it will blend in with that landscaping. That way, as you're perceiving it from the residential lot, looking through the trees, it'll blend in with the, the color of the branches and the woody nature of that vegetation. So it should not stand out as seen through the vegetation. But it will, of course, obviously will completely block light emanating from the site up to the combined berm/wall height of 15 feet. And it will also obviously mitigate sound significantly. So in terms of the variance relief necessary, because the wall goes into the required front setback, it triggers some ordinance requirements. One of which is that the wall cannot exceed 4 feet in height in the required front yard. In this case, because we're proposing a combined height of the berm and wall at 15 feet, it's obviously exceeding that. However, this is a very unusual area in Michael Curtin Lane here, which is in this northeast corner. Michael Curtin is a dead-end street. There are no driveways in close proximity to the wall. So you're not, blocking any critical view paths from a vehicle circulation situation, but at the same time, that area is blocking the development from some of the rear yards of the adjacent residential uses. So we do think it's worth extending the wall into the front yard. If the board felt otherwise, we could retreat the wall back to the front yard setback line, and that would actually eliminate that height variance. In a very similar vein,
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Real quick question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the height of the sound wall and the length of the sound wall you're proposing is to maximize the sound absorption and transmission from the site to the residents to the east?
That's correct. It's basically to separate.
Would it also be fair to say that any modification to that would reduce its ability to absorb that sound?
Correct. The bigger, the better. It's
Thank
kind
you.
of
Appreciate
logical
it.
sense. Yep.
Thank you.
So the other variance that comes out of that similar is there's also a requirement in the required setback for it to be 50% open. But actually to the point was just made, obviously it was 50% open. It would not be nearly as effective in blocking, sound or light or anything else. So that obviously makes no sense. So we are seeking that variance as well for it to be solid. And then finally, there's an 8-foot retaining wall height maximum when you're outside the required setback, and we do have up to a 9-foot tall retaining wall that is supporting, directly supporting actually the sound wall. So that 9-foot retaining wall is part of what is elevating the sound wall. So again, we think that makes total sense. While we could comply on all three of these things, it would definitely reduce the height of the wall, reduce the extent of the wall, and make it less effective. And as I already noted, we're still complying with 188-63Es in Edward, where we are providing the berm and landscaping to satisfy that ordinance standard. So this is a kind of a belt and suspenders or an additional method that we're adding. There's another waiver that we are seeking that has to do with the screening of solid waste and recycling areas. So you'll see on the, like for instance here, we're looking at building B on the left side or west side, both at the north and south end. There is some solid gray rectangles. Those are fully enclosed, compactor fed recycling and or refuse containers. They are not being landscaped immediately around them. What is being done though, there is landscaping at both ends. And this is true for both warehouses, by the way, both the A and B. So at the north and south end of the truck court, there's landscaping. And then in the case of building B, building A actually blocks the view to the truck court. And then for building A, that farmland buffer that we looked at earlier blocks the view to that truck court. So while we're not literally complying with the ordinance in that we don't have the landscaping immediately around the container, it is still buffered. The intent of the ordinance is still met. Next thing that we did, and this is kind of a minor change, but something I want to bring to your attention, if we can go to Exhibit A14, and that has to do with the water tank. In advancing this project, as time has gone on, we have refined the sanitary system. So originally we had a central sanitary pump station. In cooperation with the township sewer department, though, we have switched that to be 6 what we call E1 sanitary pump stations. And these are small, they're size of a manhole, basically, pump stations that will service the individual users. So there are 6 of them. They're underground. The benefit of that is, well, there's some engineering benefits to that, but the benefit as it applies here is that it freed up area in the vicinity of the water tank such that the water tank could be pushed farther into the site. So the tank now is about 74 feet further away from Howell Road than it was on the original plan. And that's what's depicted here. And then we have the associated pump house and equipment house immediately to the west of that. So both of these now are roughly 74 feet further back than they used to be from Howell Road, which I think is another benefit. Going back to Exhibit A19, I'm just going to touch on a few other things in terms of the driveways at either end. As part of the layout change, what we did on Howell Road, the inbound driveway, we narrowed up. Maybe you can just zoom in there. That used to be 30 feet. We narrowed that down to 20 feet inbound. And then, as I already mentioned earlier, the circulation aisle north and east of Building B, we reduced from 30 feet to 25 feet. And again, that's because that's all passenger vehicle. It's no longer a truck court there on the east side of Building B. So that's why we did that. As far as the ordinance is concerned, there's 2 ordinance sections. 188, 106A requires the planning board to approve driveways when they're wider than 24 feet. But in this case, the ordinance also mandates that for an industrial development, that wider driveways are actually required. And that's specified at 188-106F as in Frank, 1A as in Andrew, and B as in boy, for 30 feet and 25 feet respectively. We have met all that criteria, and that has also been reviewed by Chief Lewis from the fire department in both his November 21st 2022 review memorandum, which he just reconfirmed in a February 3rd, 2023 email. So again, fully satisfying the fire department, and we believe fully satisfying the ordinance. Next, if we can go to Exhibit A31. The board engineer in her February 10th, 2023 letter had a comment, specifically comment C2, that discussed the trucks passing each other, the ability of trucks in the circulation aisles to pass one another going in opposite directions. So we went ahead and made those revisions so that the trucks could do that. That's the two areas that are shaded in red here. The radii of those curves has been changed to accommodate the trucks passing one another. So that should satisfy that comment entirely. Next, if we can, just go back to the main plan now, A19. I just want to note to the board on the lighting. Originally, we had submitted a lighting plan that was fully conforming with the ordinance. What we are offering instead to do, although we're kind of agnostic about this, we'll go either way with it, is to comply, instead of complying with the ordinance, we would comply with the Illuminating Engineering Society standards. We do believe, I believe that is more appropriate for a warehouse use, but we're happy to go either way, either to comply with the ordinance or accept a waiver and comply with the IES standards. So we'll leave that. Yes.
Yeah, Jeremy, I'm sorry I'm interrupting. So the alternative lighting plan, that's A23.
Actually, I think the alternative plan is in A7. A23 is also an alternate lighting plan, but that was for the remand hearing. When we resubmitted the last time, last year, the Whispering Woods plans, the lighting plan was updated because we, at that time, understood the board was interested in the IES lighting plan. So we actually made that the lighting plan in the Whispering Woods set of plans, which is A7.
Right. Thank you for the clarification. Thanks.
No problem. But either way, we'll either comply with the ordinance or with the IES, whichever the board would prefer. We're happy to do either. And then, finally, there was a few other just grading and stormwater management changes that are ancillary to all this. As you can imagine, moving everything around, there had to be some grading, some stormwater drainage had to move, so that's all been done. The impervious coverage still completely complies. We're still well under the 70% maximum. And in the spirit of good faith, the applicant is still honoring all of our prior commitments, which include things like milling and overlaying Okerson Road in Howell Township, and also installing bollards along the parking spaces where they front the buildings. So that's are all things we're still honoring. And then just to finish addressing the February 10th letter from the board engineer, I already addressed that one comment regarding the trucks passing. There's another comment in there, 2A, that had to do with the Howell Road driveway. So just to make sure it's clear, because this wasn't originally the case, there are no trucks entering from Howell Road. So that driveway is not accommodating truck traffic, because Howell Road is a weight restricted road. So that driveway is only for passenger vehicle use. And then in terms of, there's another comment 2B in that letter, and that has to do with another truck overlap area, and that used to be in the north east corner of building B. That's no longer there because the building is flipped. I will tell you though that the truck circulation is designed really to be one way. The trucks can go both ways, but trucks want to, relative to the building, operate in a counterclockwise fashion. So what that means here is the truck would come into the site from Okerson Road, enter from the north side of the truck court, go to its assigned bay, and then exit from the south and go back out to Okerson Road. So the truck sweeps entering the truck court do not accommodate trucks coming from 2A, and that's one of the consequences of this building flip. But I think the benefit or the intended purpose of the flip would outweigh that functional issue. There's excellent sight distance, and having done a lot of this work, both as an engineer and as the director of development for active acquisitions, I'm very comfortable operationally that this flow is safe and efficient and will work for the intended purpose. And then two more housekeeping things and I'm done. 5A in the letter, I had mentioned this to the board engineer at one point. But in terms of plans, we will provide roadway profile and roadway cross sections for all areas of the roadway, which is really Howell Road that we are widening. But areas where we are doing mill and overlay, we're just going to show the extent of the mill and overlay on a plan view. And then finally, with regard to environmental, the environmental issues, particularly AOC number 1, will be addressed at the time the site work commences. So with that, that's the end of my testimony. And then, Rob, I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if we're going to go right into Christine's planning testimony or if we're going to pause for
Yes.
questions.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, we would ask if it's okay with the board that if we can proceed directly with Ms. Gaffone's testimony, because it sort of weaves in with Mr. Lang's testimony, and then at the end, we would open up both witnesses for questions of the board and the public.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Gaffone?
Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Christine, Christine, Cofone, Cofone. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. I'm testifying this evening as a licensed professional planner. I've been testifying as such for 27 years in the state of New Jersey. I've been qualified in Howell on many, many occasions, as well in excess of over 400 or so planning and zoning boards. I teach planning and zoning courses for the Rutgers Center for Government Services, and my licenses are current and valid.
Okay, we'll accept your credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Gaffone, you've been present to hear the testimony of Mr. Lang with regard to this Whispering Woods settlement hearing?
Yes, I have.
And he referenced some variances and waivers that are triggered by the revised plan. If you can go over them in terms of the applicable criteria for the relief that is needed to be granted by the board incident to those variances and waivers.
Of course. So the variance relief that Mr. Lang spoke about earlier this evening relates to the construction of the sound wall. There were 3 variances that he spoke about that were associated with that wall. It was for the height of the wall, the fact that the wall is not 50% open, as well as the height of the retaining wall to support the construction of that sound wall. From a planning point of view, statutorily, the board can grant those bulk variances under 2 mechanisms, C1 or C2. Those criteria are not unique to this application, and they're certainly relative to any board granting a variance in the state of New Jersey. The C1 relate to a hardship. The C2 criteria relate to a better zoning alternative. This to me is a textbook case of a C2 variance. And the reason I say that is because while the applicant is proposing this sound wall, the applicant in no way needs to construct this sound wall for either the benefit of constructing building A or B, meaning that we can construct those buildings. We can comply with the buffers per Howell's ordinance. We meet the sound regulations without building this sound wall. The reason we're building this sound wall is to provide greater screening and greater sound attenuation for the benefit of our neighbors. Mr. Lang explained extensively how the construction of the wall will certainly allow for better buffering to the rear yard setbacks of the adjoining homeowners. So with that being said, I find this to be, in my opinion, a textbook C2 variance, meaning that it's a better zoning alternative, it's more palatable to the neighbors to have it, but we certainly don't need to have it in order to construct 1 single square foot of our building related to building A or B. So the purposes of the land use law that would be advanced if the board granted this, in my opinion, would be criteria A, promoting the general welfare. There's obviously been a lot of public interest in this case, and certainly the ability to create screening and sound attenuation for the additional screening and sound attenuation for the benefit of our neighbors would certainly promote the general welfare. Criteria I also talks about promoting a desirable visual environment. Those stated purposes are found at section 40:55D-2 of the municipal land use law, and statutorily, in order to sustain our burden of proof, we only have to advance 1. I believe those 2 are solidly advanced by the grant of the variance relief associated with the sound wall. As far as the negative criteria, the land use law does not ask you to hold us or any other applicant to a standard that there be no detriment, just that the benefits of the grant of the variance outweigh any detriment. You heard Mr. Lang testify extensively this evening. There are things that we can do to the wall. We can eliminate the wall in its entirety. We do not need it. We can modify the wall. We can put up a a 50% solid wall. We can make the wall shorter. There are things that we can do to it to make it a different and would have a different impact. Or as Mr. Tannenhouse indicated, less of an effective impact. But when you don't need to have the wall there to meet your state guidelines or to meet your township ordinance requirements, you do have that flexibility as an applicant. So to come to the conclusion that the grant of the variance would have a substantial detriment on either the public good or the zone plan, I just don't see it. I think that the variance relief associated with that wall is reasonable in nature, advances the positive criteria as well as the negative criteria. And not only will it not have a substantial negative impact on the it will not have a substantial negative impact on the neighborhood. It actually creates benefits with regard to sound attenuation and screening. It's a muted color program, and I think that we certainly substantiate our burden of proof with respect to the positive and negative criteria. As far as the waivers, Mr. Lang identified those as well. He spoke about the waiver for the landscaping around the dumpsters, so the refuse areas associated with both building A and building B. It's really, we are meeting the intent of the ordinance. Those structures will absolutely be screened from view. The issue is the landscaping isn't immediately adjacent to them. So certainly there are some practical issues there. And as far as the lighting, the illumination, we can comply with the ordinance. It's not as if we can't comply. It is our design professionals' belief that the IES, the Illuminating Engineer Society standards are more appropriate for a warehouse, but we could certainly comply with the ordinance if we needed to, but we feel it's a better alternative to seek that waiver. The standard for a waiver and the land use law specifically allows for the board to grant waivers if you feel as though they are reasonable and the general purpose and intent of the provision of the ordinance are met with respect to the site plan review. In both instances relative to the siting and the lighting, we are meeting the intent of the ordinance. Those refuse areas and recycling areas will absolutely be screened from view. There is more than enough landscaping in compliance with the ordinance requirements. It's not as if we're asking for relief from the quantity or the quality or the size of the plants to be provided, just that they're simply not immediately adjacent to the refuse areas. So with the standard for those two waivers, being that they be reasonable and still meet the intent of the ordinance, I feel as though the applicant has certainly met its burden of proof with respect to the grant of the waivers. With that, I have nothing further on direct, Mr. Simon.
And Ms. Gaffone, with regard to the waivers, just a couple of things. One of the considerations always is impracticability. Can you just go to, in terms of whether it's practical to comply with the ordinance for the reasons that Mr. Lang stated?
Well,
Just
it's certainly not
regarding the
practical.
waivers
Yes,
that
of
you
course.
touched on.
The practicality of complying with installing landscaping immediately adjacent to a refuse area, particularly one that's not visible from the adjoining roadway networks or any of the neighbors, is not practical. It makes more sense to provide screening, perhaps not immediately adjacent, but surrounding as the applicant is proposing, but still meeting the intent of the ordinance, which is the test here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And there was also a question, I think, regarding maybe one of the prior review memos as to whether it was necessary to have certain spacing between the curbing ramps with regard to the requirement of having curb ramps every 65 feet, and that they should not apply to drive aisles except at intersections because mid-block crossings of drive aisles do serve parking areas and as compared to areas where there's no pedestrian circulation.
Correct, and I think the board wouldn't even want to encourage the pedestrian location in there. So I think the plan that we have before the board is certainly appropriate and has meets the intent of the ordinance.
And you would agree that it would be impractical to comply since it would create a safety concern under those circumstances.
Yes, it would create a less desirable pedestrian crossing.
Okay, and so with that, Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions for Ms. Gaffone, for Mr. Lang, and so I open up both witnesses first to the board.
Sure. Anybody from the board have any questions?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could you stop screen? There we go. Thank you.
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anybody else from the board have any questions?
Just to confirm, they're gonna honor paving Okerson Road, they said?
Mr.
Yes,
Lang?
they did.
Okay.
Okay, everybody from the board good? So before I open it up to the public, Mr. Cuchero, is there a scope as far as what?
Sure. Basically, questions can be asked about anything that was testified to tonight, comments about anything that was testified to tonight. But, the public is restrained, as we as a board are, by the court decision. We cannot entertain issues about traffic. It's already been ruled upon. Issues upon the environmental impact. It's already been ruled upon. Issues relating to the cemetery. It's already been ruled upon. Really, we are limited to what has been testified to tonight. And again, that's not a board decision. That's from the court.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that being said, we'll open up for questions from the public
Questions and comments.
and comments.
Okay, at this time, the chairman has opened up the hearing for questions and comments of the public. I ask you to please use the raise your hand feature. I'll bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will be sworn in and have to give your name and address. To raise your hand, if you're calling in, press *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And to start, I have Rosemary Bird.
Okay, just let me know when she's in.
She's there.
Okay, Ms. Bird, if you could just unmute yourself.
Okay,
Okay, you swear or affirm.
I'm a little confused. This is on the warehouse unit, right?
That is
Yes.
correct.
Yeah, I don't want to discuss this. I'm here to discuss the Doman and Bird.
Oh, okay, that'll be the next application.
Right.
Okay.
Don't wait. Please don't raise your hand until he opens it to the public then. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have bumped it by accident.
Okay. 1 second. Next, I have Manu Chopra.
Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you please state and spell your name and give us your address?
Manu Chopra, Manuchopra. My address 7168 Westfield Court, Alexandria, Virginia 22306.
Do you own property in Howell?
Yes, my dad owns a townhouse. I live by a basketball and a tennis court. And usually on nice days like this, I just get to play basketball and tennis in my neighborhood.
Okay.
But you're welcome to come this Sunday to my basketball tournament.
We appreciate the invitation. Thank you for signing in tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
1 second. Next, I have Kathy Okerson.
Okay, you just need to unmute.
Got it.
Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record and give us your address.
Kathy with a K, Okerson, Okerson, 459 Okerson Road.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
You talk about a lot that we can't talk about tonight, but I'm still concerned about the water. I'm looking at that plans and how are they going to address all the water that comes off that farm that comes off without buildings there?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the judge found that the applicant had satisfied all ordinance requirements, which would include the stormwater management. So there's been a judicial ruling on that.
okay, thank you.
So if I get flooded out, I come back to the board?
Yeah,
No.
we're here to discuss the application and to do it in a way that we've been ordered to by the judge.
Right, but you didn't say anything about the water. You
I
said
just did.
about
The
the
judge
traffic.
said that they had complied with everything. And the only thing that we needed to do was to talk about design waiver relief. So the judge has not permitted us to revisit stormwater management.
Okay, what are the difference between the two lightings that they're talking about?
Well, that the applicant can answer.
Go ahead.
Jeremy,
So it has to do with the evenness of the distribution of the lighting, excuse me, and the intensity. The IES standards are better for warehousing. They have some higher lighting in areas where it's important and lower where it's not. Whereas the ordinance standard has a more even requirement. So it's not as task orientated, which would be a more appropriate lighting here. So basically we want the best lighting in the truck court, which from, the neighbor's perspective is, behind the building, particularly in this layout, it's very much behind the building because we have flip building B. So we
Right,
definitely
but
think-
that doesn't help me because you have everything facing the farm. So which lighting would benefit not lighting my house up like a Christmas tree?
Neither lighting plan will light it up like a Christmas tree. These are both recognized lighting standards that will not be offensive, not have light trespass. These are fully enclosed lighting fixtures, so you're not going to get the light trespass you're concerned about.
So I'm not gonna have it like I have the baseball field lighting up the house.
No, that's it. Sports lighting is an entirely different level of lighting, orders of magnitude higher in all respects, actually, in intensity and the height of the fixtures. So it's entirely different.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
And how do I get off this?
I'll move you.
Thank you.
Next, I have AJC.
We need you to unmute yourself. Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. My name is Albert J. Sestero Jr. I live at 3 Howell Road, Freehold, New Jersey. We're in the backyard of this project.
Can you just spell your last name for us, sir?
Cestero.
Okay, go ahead.
Jr. My first name is Albert. We've lived here for 40 years. I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Lang. There are 2 active driveways, number 3 Howell Road, which is mine, and number 1 Howell Road, which is next door to me. Those are 2 active driveways at the end of Michael Curtin Lane. We use them every day. It's hard enough to get out on Howell Road, which is a difficult task. So that's what we use, and they've been active for 40 years. My other question to you was, I noticed on the plans and in the testimony that there didn't seem to be any kind of improvement on Michael Curtin Lane, even though your project does front it, and there's no accommodation for any kind of sidewalk there. And In previous testimony, there was a issue about a sidewalk on Howell Road, and some people questioned it and basically said that they didn't see a need for it because Howell Road really isn't trafficked by pedestrians. But when the Department of Transportation reconfigured the intersection at Route 33, Howell Road, Five Points Road, Okerson Road, they put in the intersection crosswalks and curb cuts in anticipation of heavy pedestrian traffic. There is heavy pedestrian traffic in the summertime on bicycles going to the Howell Point Swim Club from the developments on Five Point Road, and also to the ball fields on Okerson Road. Lastly, I wanted to bring to your attention, to the board's attention, recently the railroad that was removed from Okerson Road and Howell Road, they reactivated that. They're laying tracks now. So there's going to be an active railroad crossing on Okerson Road and an active railroad crossing on Howell Road. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and especially to Mr. Lang about the driveways. There are active driveways. We want, if this thing is going to go through, and it appears that it is, because even though the majority of Howell Township doesn't want it, the board didn't want it 2 times. I appreciate the board members for denying it in October of 21 and September of 2022. It kind of, it's a bit alarming to me as a Howell Township taxpayer for over 40 years, 46 years in my small business in this township, that the vast majority of the township doesn't want it. The planning board voted it down twice, and one Superior Court judge is able to push it through. So with that being said, there needs to be on notice as far as the railroad crossings, which I know were not included in your plans because it didn't exist at the time, and the pedestrian traffic. So I'm asking the project developers to, if they're going to do something, Michael Curtin Lane right now, we were promised years ago when they did the traffic reconfiguration, that road was supposed to be paved. It was supposed to be taken care of. There was supposed to be signage put up on it, and there's been absolutely nothing done since. It's a mess. Right now, our grandchildren ride their bicycles on it because there's hardly any traffic there, but that's going to change. So I'm asking the planners to include, if you're going to get this thing done, the wall as high as you can get it. I have no problems with that. I don't know whether or not it's going to have to be set back off of Michael Curtin Lane or not, being that there are active driveways, but and a sidewalk, and also if you're going to mill Okerson Road, to please take care of Michael Curtin Lane if this is going through, and it appears that it is. Thank you for your time.
There's no sign on Michael Curtin.
Thank you.
It's not their
I
problem.
have one more question.
Oh, wait a minute. My wife wants to talk.
About the maintenance of the wall.
Go ahead.
You can do it.
But my wife is
Ma'am,
asking
ma'am,
who's
ma'am,
going to
just before you start, I need to swear you in also.
Oh, okay.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Okay, if you could just state your name.
yes, Jacqueline Sestero.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
I just had a question about maintenance of the wall. Who is going to be, are they going to be taking care of that wall?
Yeah, that would be the
back up.
property owner's responsibility to maintain the wall.
Okay, the people are putting up. And the lighting, I know Mrs. Okerson brought up the lighting, and I was a bit confused about that. Given that we're, I'm going to just off the top of my head, 250 feet from the wall, or not even that
No,
much.
50
feet from the
Yeah.
wall.
If that.
So maybe 250 feet from the building and the lighting. I hope the board decides in favor of residents that live nearby, as it is our lighting here with all the other industrial areas around. I mean, when we moved here, it wasn't like that.
Sure.
Now it's we can't see the
Well,
sky at night because it's flooded.
The buildings in the area have been putting up LED lights, and they are right in our face. And actually, if you try to pull out our driveway onto Howell Road at night, one of the lights across the way in Sakers Industrial Park, it blinds you. So I'm just asking you to consider us. We've been here a very long time. And also consider the addition of 2 railroad crossings, one on Howell Road and one on Okerson Road, which will absolutely be impacted by this project with all the traffic. So
you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address that one.
Sure.
Great.
Ms. Newman?
Pardon?
No, she's saying Miss Newman.
Oh,
Ms.
okay.
Newman, can you come back in for a second, please?
There she is.
Ms. Newman, our lighting ordinance requires lights to be installed in such a manner that they do not provide any type of glare especially off of their property. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. They cannot have spillage.
And if we have buildings that have replaced lighting that now provides a glare, that's not a regulation issue, but that's enforcement. That's a code enforcement issue that should be brought to the town. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
And this applicant's gonna have to comply with that as well.
Okay, I had just one more thing to add about Michael Curtin Lane. There's no signage at all. There never has been. We did go to a council meeting years ago and they said it would be taken care of. It never was.
Yeah, we didn't push the issue.
The road is never plowed, never. I've never seen it plowed. We plow it ourselves.
Yeah.
And there's no maintenance as far as it's starting to crumble.
Right.
So if a truck comes in off of Okerson Road and maybe has a misturn or it needs to turn around, I'm thinking they're going to turn around on Michael Curtin Lane. As it stands, there's very poor drainage there. There's a
floods.
big vented. It floods when we have a heavy rain.
Yep.
But also the condition of the road, I don't know if it will withstand a tractor trailer.
Yeah, it won't.
It's already crumbling on the sides.
Right.
So do I bring that up to the council again about maintenance of that road, or is that
That
something?
would be the proper body. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank-
Thank
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for the Cisteros.
Sure.
It is. This Michael Curtin Lane, is this directly behind your house? I'm looking on a map right now and it doesn't even list it as a regular road.
They,
Well, why don't we have Laura? Laura, are you able to weigh in on what the,
I mean, it's a lane, so it's not a wide roadway. It's classified as a lane, but
Well, what it is, it's the remnant of the old Okerson Road.
No, so it was a road.
It was a road, and when DOT reconfigured Okerson Road, what they did was they left the portion of Okerson Road that went past our back, our frontage on our back road here, and which intersected at the intersection, which is named 5 Points Road, because there were 5 roads intersecting there. It was 5 Points Road, Route 33 East, Route 33 West, Howell Road, and Okerson Road. So it's the remnant of a town road that, when it was reconfigured, the township said that they were going to name it Michael Curtin Lane, after the first soldier that was killed, I believe, in Iraq in one of the wars from New Jersey. It was Michael Curtin from Howell Township. But they never did that, and I never pushed the issue. They were supposed to put signage up on the road, and they were supposed to maintain the road, and they've never maintained it. So what I'm asking you is, if you're building a project on that road, you're already talking about milling Okerson Road, which is a whole lot longer than Michael Curtin Lane, and you are going to have frontage on Michael Curtin Lane. If you put a sidewalk on Michael Curtin Lane in the front, so at least it looks presentable from our standpoint, and it's safe, because there is foot traffic there.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, let's just ask the applicant, are you willing to pave the portion of Michael Curtin Lane and provide sidewalk as was requested by the resident?
No on the paving, yes on the sidewalk.
All right. Township is
Yeah, we could just go
responsible.
after the township for the paving of the road then. I get that.
Perfect.
Mr. Sestero, I have a meeting with the town manager tomorrow. I'm going to ask this about this and get back to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Gassier.
You're welcome. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you.
I have a phone-in caller.
Okay,
You have to
Eileen,
unmute.
you just tell them how to unmute themselves on the phone again.
Uh,
Oh, they did it.
I'm sorry, I'm the court reporter that's here for Mr. Simon.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, is there anybody public?
I have no one else with their hand up right now.
Okay, so then I'm gonna close the public portion.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, again, well, actually, let me turn it over to Mr. Simon if he has any closing remarks, and then I'll address the board.
Okay.
Right, thank you. And we really appreciate certainly the board agreeing to hear us and entering into the settlement agreement with us, certainly subject to a public hearing, which is what we're conducting under the Whispering Woods case, where the applicant has the opportunity to present the settlement, which it has through the testimony of Mr. Lang and Ms. Cafone, as well as hearing from members of the public and obviously any questions of the board. And I will say parenthetically that in my over 30 years practicing, that this is the first time I've seen an applicant go forward with a settlement plan, not once, but twice in a good faith attempt to go in above and beyond the applicant's legal obligations under the ordinance and the MLUL in response to, some requests from the board, including a sound attenuation wall and obviously changing the orientation of one of the buildings. We believe that the applicant has continued to pursue this application, including the settlement in good faith. We are proud of the plan as certainly as revised, and we ask you to act favorably upon the application that's before you pursuant to a Whispering Woods hearing.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, essentially what the board has in front of it was the presentation of the settlement plan. If the board is amiable to the plan, then it would be a motion to either grant preliminary and final site plan approval subject to the conditions, or preliminary site plan approval subject to the conditions. Mr. Simon, I just want to run through a couple of the conditions that are not the boilerplate conditions to make sure that we're both on the same page.
Sure, and I may ask Mr. Lang to chime in to the extent necessary.
There's going to be sidewalk on Michael Curtin Lane. The property owner will have the responsibility of maintaining the sound wall. There's going to be a condition confirming that there's not going to be light spillage onto the adjoining properties. Subject, if the board grants you the waiver relief, that you would be going with the alternative, IED?
IEF.
IEF lighting requirements, and then the standard requirements, obtaining all outside agency approvals, certification that taxes are paid to date. Is there anything, and also, compliance with any of the technical comments in the board's reports, board professionals reports rather. That's
And
pretty much
Mr.
what I have.
Cucchiaro, I did, as I testified to, I did address a few of Laura's comments, so just consistent with that testimony.
Well, is there something in the report that you're not doing? I guess, let me ask it that way.
The only thing he's not going to do is it was as stipulated. So the areas of Howell Road that are going to be milled, he's not going to provide the cross sections and the profile, and the AOC #1, that will be completed when site work commences on the site. Previously, we had noted prior to construction, it will be when site work commences.
Right.
Okay,
correct.
Upon site work commencing, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, then with that, Mr. Chairman, if the board wants to make a motion.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application for preliminary and final site plan with all the stipulations discussed.
Second,
I have a motion and a second. Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente, Ms. Talente? You,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilman Gager?
Yes.
Mr. Kyle?
Yes.
Mr. Mercer?
Yes.
And Chairman Bavai?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We thank the board very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for listening to our presentation.
Okay, have a good night. Can somebody give Nick a text?
Yeah, I'll text him.
All right, I'm tapping out. I'm on vacation and I am leaving. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Hey.
Enjoy, Paul.
Enjoy, Paul.
Yep, bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome.
Eileen, is Rosemary Bird's application up next?
Yes, so you have to recuse yourself, correct?
I do. Is this the last one for the night?
Yes, it is.
No executive tonight, right, Ron?
No, no executive tonight.
Need you
Okay,
back.
so then I guess I need to log off then.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, bye, guys.
Good night.
Nick is logging in, so give me a minute.
Let's get you on there. All right. I have Stanley with me, so everybody knows.
Stanley. Do I have to bring him into the meeting?
Stanley
Or-
Dillman.
Oh. I have Jeffrey Carr. Do you need anyone else?
You have Rosemary also? She mentioned she was here.
Yes, she
Yes, hold
accidentally
on.
came into our last hearing.
I will get her.
Eileen, Nick is India participants.
Okay, I'll get him.
I'm ready whenever I'm told to proceed.
Is Paul no longer on?
No, he left. You're in charge now, Nick.
Good to know.
Yeah, he was on vacation.
You're up.
All right,
I got
Has
good
this-
news for you. No executive session.
got it. So has this application been formally introduced?
No.
No, we can open it to Mr. Galvin to introduce it.
Okay, Mr. Galvin, floor is yours.
All right. I hope this will be a relatively simple matter for you. We represent the birds and domins. They came before the board 3 or 4 years, certainly before the COVID attack, and they got approval for a subdivision that allowed 2 single-family homes with an attached farm of 5 acres. One of the things that occurred on this property is that we have an easement that looks like a road. and we faced both houses towards that easement. So I think it looks good, but it creates issues for the zoning officials because the prior attorney, the prior application didn't address technical issues that come up with when you're using the easement and you think it's a roadway, you use it like a roadway, but it's not actually a roadway. So the section of the house along the street is being treated like a front yard, and it prevents certain things from being located in it, when in actuality, it's a side yard. And the homes are really far away from the roadway to add to this. So we need some help getting clarification as to what's going on the site. Now, we were asked to do a farm conservation easement that we don't need because of how the farm is located, and I'll have Stanley explain that. 2, we learned that the deer like to eat everything that we're putting on our site, so we need deer fencing. That's the only thing that we're really asking for that's a change. The only thing that we kind of need help with is we need your authorization to treat the front yard as a side yard. So let Stanley come on board, let him tell you his view of this. And then I have Mr. Carr, who probably doesn't have too much to offer, except that he knows what we presented and can speak to anything that we presented in the past. All right, any questions? And
Okay, is Mr. Doman on?
Yes, let's do that. I have him right next to me, and I'm gonna move him on. There you go. All right,
Okay,
I'm
do
here.
you swear or affirm
Raise
the
your right hand.
testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, if you could just state and spell your name for the record.
Stanley Doman, Stanley, Doman, Domin.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Doman.
As Mr. Galvin said, the primary issue that we have here is the orientation of the houses, the way they were approved. The way that the lot actually functioned is more as a corner lot. And when I went to go apply for a fence permit along Newton's Corner Road, as everyone else who shares my orientation on that street, they're capable of putting 6-foot fences along that roadway. And I was told by the zoning people that I have to come to the planning board every single time that I want to do something that everybody else has the right to do simply with a permit, which because we also have a shed in the front yard that was also previously approved of the variance on the spot last time that we came to the planning board. So the issue is that I would like to turn what is technically a front yard into the practical side yard according to the code with the corner lot usage.
And then what about the deer fencing?
We do have a farm that is adjacent. The whole property is 10 acres. It's subdivided into 2 house lots and a 7-acre farm lot. It was more practical for us to put the fence around the entire perimeter of the property as opposed to just doing it around the farm and putting a gate coming into the easement, which we intend to upgrade to an automatic gate for vehicles.
And let me ask you
and the house lots themselves are also over an acre, so that's also additional growing space that we could use.
Now, we filed easements that we were required to file from the application.
Yes, the original planning board approval came with farmland buffers, but somehow those got transitioned into conservation easements when all the paperwork was done with. Well, when we did the original subdivision, the back lot wasn't Q farm yet. So they were still treating it as residential, and they made us put a farmland buffer along the entire northern part of the property because we bought another farm, which ended up turning out to be like a whole acre worth of property that they told us that we couldn't use. So when we did the second subdivision to change the lot lines to make the farm bigger, we found out that the farmland buffer was actually the conservation easement, which is actually owned by the state now, as opposed to just a farmland buffer that I guess the township controls. Like, I guess nobody knew that these were 2 entirely different things at the time. And when we did the second planning board meeting, they the township, I guess the planning board acknowledged that this was an error and they voted to repeal the first one on the farm lot. But for some reason, at the same time, they acknowledged that the one on the house lot was also incorrect, but they didn't fix it at the same time. I don't know why.
So we're looking to remove that second easement.
Yeah, we acknowledge the need for a farmland buffer, but not the conservation easement, which is a deeded thing, which is a whole different
So,
category.
Mr. Galvin, I just want to be clear. You're asking that the conservation easement be extinguished?
Yes.
In favor of a farmland buffer.
And
Which is what we're supposed to have.
who's the beneficiary of the conservation easement? Did Mr. Doman say the state was?
I think we've heard through the grapevine here that the state gets all the conservation easements.
Right.
Sorry.
So, I mean, if the board is agreeable to it, we could certainly say we no longer require it, but we certainly couldn't compel the state, to give up their rights. And in some instances,
Mr. Cuchero, I understand that, and I will help him with picking up all the pieces after. We just need to get through the planning board process and make sure that we have the general support for what we think is the right solution, and then we'll pursue that.
we did have, I was speaking to Laura earlier, either today or yesterday, about one of the descriptions. I think, Laura, it was described as an easement, but also a right of way or something.
Yeah, so the central portion or the stem, which goes back to the farm lot, is specifically called out as a 50-foot wide utility access easement and right of way.
It is.
So I understand.
It is. That's what we're talking
about.
That's acting, Ron, like a street. We're at the front. Our houses are both facing the right of way. That utility easement is how you could reach the farm, but the houses are turned at a 90-degree angle to the street, and so the front of the houses are facing the utility easement as if it's a street.
So if I understand,
right, but it's not a right of way then. I mean, it's an easement.
It's an easement. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all I wanted to clear up.
All right.
And just so the board understands, you're looking to use what I would call then your secondary front yard, which is the portion along Newton's Corner Road. You would like that treated as a side yard.
Correct. Because for us, the reality for us is it is a side yard, but not technically there's no way that I could make the argument that that's a side yard based on the ordinance.
Understood.
Okay.
And Stanley's saying we're going to treat it as a side yard, as if it was a corner, as if that easement's a street. So we'll be mindful of the fact that it's got two fronts or a pretend two fronts.
I think we got where Mr. Doman's coming from.
And I have Mr. Carr here, and he told me he absolutely had to be heard tonight.
Well, we don't want
So
to.
if you need to hear from our engineer.
Well,
Mr. Carr,
anybody who knows me knows that's not true.
do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Jeffrey J. Carr, C-A-R-R, principal with the firm of Lindstrom, Deezer and Carr, licensed professional engineer and professional planner, state of New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Chair, do we accept Mr. Carr as an engineer and planner?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. And Jeff, your understanding of the original proposal, did you think the property was going to be used in the fashion that we've described tonight?
Yes, and I think that was what the board understood it as well. The Doman zone, both of the lots, plus the farmland lot, which was anticipated to be used also as a third residence for the family as well. So that was always the understanding, and it was subdivided with the whatever you want to call it, private right of way or common driveway for all of those lots. So that was the intent. I think the probably where it went a little south was that nobody really understood, and we did get plot plans approved for this with the orientation of the house. I think that the misunderstanding was that nobody really thought the impact of the house facing the interior access common driveway, and that's where the garage is faced, and that's where the driveway's access to. So for safety reasons, it makes sense as well. The traffic does all the turnaround on a site there, and there's no access onto Newton's Corner Road. But I don't think anybody realized the impact when you wanted to put up a fence or you wanted to put up a shed, what impact that would have. And these lots are, as Mr. Doman indicated, they're 1.25 acres each, and they are 145 feet across the frontage and 375 feet deep. So they are large lots, and the houses are set back quite a distance. And I'll give you the approximate number. Oh, it's actually on a plan. The houses are set back 205 feet off of Newton's Corner Road. So you can see the impact that I'll say ordinance definition does as far as usability on the side of the house.
Thank you. That's all we have at this juncture.
So, Mr. Chairman,
So-
can I just ask a few questions?
Sure.
One, Jeff, we just had a couple minor comments in our review letter. Do you agree to comply with those? Item 7.
What'd you say on page 7?
Item 7.
Oh, item 7. 4, 5, 6 per copy survey. Yes, 200 foot. Yes, these are all minor technical revisions. Yes, we would agree.
Okay, thank you.
Christine, Sherry, you guys got anything?
We really take no issue with this application. It's acting as a farm. What they're asking to do keeps the buffer between the residential use and farming use, but it's really just allowing them to better utilize their farm.
Great. Sherry, anything?
Have anything? Thanks.
Okay. Any members of the board? Any questions, comments?
I do, Mr. Hesser.
Yeah, Brian, what's up?
This is for Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr, the proposed gate that's going to get motorized is Newton's Corner is a pretty busy road. Is there enough driveway in front of that gate so that you can have proper queuing for cars and any delivery trucks that may be
Yes,
anticipated?
it's set back 50 feet from the property line, and the property line is about another plus or minus 23 feet from the edge of pavement. So it's close to 75 feet before the gate. Yep.
And just for the record, what is the typical length of a delivery box truck, let's say, for instance?
Box truck is typically 30 feet long. It's typically referred to as a SU-30 vehicle, single unit, 30 foot.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, Eileen, I guess we'll open it up to the public.
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public. If you would like to have questions or comments on this application, please use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling in, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. And I have Mark Parisi with his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Parisi, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Can you please state and spell your name and give us your address?
Mark Parisi, Marcparisi, 2 Castle Court.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Parisi.
I just want to say that I had my hand raised for the last application and no one called on me to speak. I had my hand raised. I raised my hand when the last telephone call came in. I raised my hand and was not given the opportunity to speak on that application. My hand has been raised the entire time.
There was no hand raised when I told the chairman there were no hands
Well,
raised.
this is a different application. We'll mark Mr. Parisi's, statement for the record, and I'll look into it.
Please do.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Keep it open for another minute. I don't see anybody's hand raised, but if anybody from the public would like to comment, raise your hand. Christopher, I see. Oh, Christopher, no. Christopher, yay. Christopher, no.
I'm going to bring Christopher in just in case.
You just need to unmute yourself, Christopher.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes,
Thank
you
you.
are. Do you swear or affirm the testimony?
Video, or
about-
you don't need video?
Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Please
Without
state and
doubt.
spell your name for the record.
My name is Christopher Catalfano. I live at 485 Newton's Corner Road. I am the adjacent property south of the properties in concern.
Mr.
And
Catafano, just for the record, can you spell your last name for us?
Catalfano.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, first off, I'm going to talk about the orientation of the houses. A mistake on the Birds' part in the first planning board meeting for flipping their houses, which I had opposed on the first planning board meeting when they went for first approvals. I said the houses should not be facing the access easement road. They should be facing Newton's Corner Road, and that is on township record. They decided not to do that. And in turn, what the township approved is I had a house looking into my backyard. So I was not happy with the first planning board outcome and the access to the back. The back of the property now was originally supposed to be a farm. Now, farmland buffer, now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm a residential property. They're a commercial farmland property back there. Shouldn't I be afforded this 50-foot buffer? I mean, I was not ever a farm. I am a single family home. I am on a large lot. I own 6 acres of land over here. My property extends from Newton's Corner Road to the back corner of Rosemary Bird and Stanley Dahman's property. From the very beginning, this has been nothing but a nightmare for me. I mean, I've asked for concessions. The first planning board meeting, we've gotten nothing. Second planning board meeting, when they went back to rezone their front yards, and I made concessions. I was very polite. I said, look, all I wanted was a privacy fence. Miss Bird eventually put up that privacy fence. At first, she tried to get away with a chicken wire fence and did not comply to the privacy fence. So this is number 2, 3, 4 of what all the fairy tales that have been told by this saga. So my privacy has been deeply compromised. They set back the house farther back than my property. So they're looking directly in my backyard from their house that is adjoining my house, which I've been informed as of last night that Miss Rosemary Bird lives there and owns that particular property. Okay, and she does not own the other properties. So I guess her interest is because her son, Mr. Dahman, wants to keep his deer fence up, which also is another issue that I'm going to talk about later. So now the fact that they decided to spin their houses is irrelevant to the fact that their side property is their front yard. It doesn't matter how far back it's off Newton's Corner Road. My house sits approximately 160 feet off Newton's Corner Road, and their house is more than that. So they're back probably 200 feet. I didn't measure it with a ruler. I'm just estimating. So their side yard is their front yard. And I have to look out my kitchen window at school buses, temporary sheds, tractors, permanent sheds, and all kinds of stuff. I says, it's not pleasant for me. I moved to this area 27 years ago for privacy. And then it got totally destroyed when they went for the first approvals and they went and clear cut 10 acres of land without regard to any impact around. I was not afforded a privacy buffer. I was not afforded anything. I was told now that this got approved that they didn't have to give me a buffer because they clear cut right up to the property line because this was a residential property in the back. It was never proposed as a residential property. It was always proposed as farmland. So I wasn't even given an inch of any kind of buffer, any kind of screening, any kind of anything.
Rolling your eyes already.
What was that, Rosemary? I heard you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Miss Byrd, if you could just place yourself on mute. This is open to members of the public. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay. So the front yard should be treated as the front yard. I treat my front yard as my front yard. When I first moved down here, I cleared out low brush on my front yard. I kept all the natural vegetation and trees out there. I planted grass out there, I maintain it, and it's landscaped properly. I have a 6-foot stockade fence that's parallel with the front of my house to separate my front yard from my rear yards and side yards. So allowing them to just willy-nilly say, hey, my house, just because we spun it, oh, we made a mistake, it's okay. It's not okay. Their mistake does not constitute a resolution to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll let you use your side yard as your front yard. That's irrelevant. And in addition, the buffers that they get is irrelevant because the last planning board meeting, the second planning board meeting, when Miss Byrd gave up 3/4 of an acre of her property to the farm, which now she says doesn't have any backyard. That's not my problem. That's her mistake. Why do I have to pay for her mistake? I don't care if she has a 10-foot backyard. I moved down to Howell Township in this particular area, knowing the zoning of this particular area is going to maintain as a rural area. I came down here from a high density area in Edison. I did not like it. That's why I moved down here. I did not want to see my next door neighbor 5 feet away from my house. So it's a privacy issue with that. But as far as I'm concerned, the side of her house to the road is the front of her house. And in addition, from the second planning board meeting, when I did agree for them to shorten their lots up, make smaller lots than what was required on there, and I turned my head and said, okay, as long as you give me what I wasn't afforded at the very first planning board meeting, which was a little bit of privacy, a little bit. And they decided to just go ahead and say, sure. And that's when they put up the wire fence. And then after I complained, then they put up the stockade fence. After I had to go back at the township and say, this is not proper. I had to wait a few months before they went back and checked records. So then it was agreed upon that I was going to get a 50-foot wide natural buffer in the back that was afforded back to the lot because they wanted to build a greenhouse on the north line of the property. On the north line, not the south line, was supposed to remain natural vegetation 50 feet from my property line back to the original property line of the original property lines. So the least I can maintain a little bit of privacy. Well, Mr. Dahman decided on his own last December to clear out that property right up to my property line. And in addition to add insult to injury, that is a swell that feeds the Sandy Hill Brook, I believe it is. That's wetlands back there. They went and they dumped tons and tons and tons of dirt. They dug it from the areas up in the higher elevations and came back and dumped it. I had sent an email to Eileen Suso or back in July. I sent her photos. I sent her pictures of what they were doing, raising the land and excessive runoff coming onto my property, photos of the rain building up, washing out my property. Now I have this wetlands in my back. I respect the wetlands in this town. It's very important to this town. So they went and disturbed wetlands. They raised the land. Now I have excessive runoff, which is disturbing the land on my property. I said, there's a lot of issues here. There's more than just, we're not just talking about a little fence, and we're not just talking about, oh, we just want to reclassify the front of our house. There's a lot more involved in this than just a fence. So, I mean, it seems like we're being very dismissive here, and the engineers here are playing stupid that they don't understand what they actually did. They made a mistake. They made a mistake by allowing them to spin the houses. The township maybe have made a mistake by allowing it to happen because they did not fully explain to the birds what the ramifications of this was. But their lawyer, their engineers, their architects, and all their people should have understood this from the beginning of this project, not 10 years later into it. And now they keep wanting more concessions from the town. Oh, we're just going to bend the rules for this. This is not proper. This is not fair to anybody in Howell Township. To have one person to say, oh, I forgot, doesn't cut it.
Anything else, sir?
The other thing I have to talk about, excuse me, I got to take a drink of water. Sorry. Is they put up this deer fence that we're talking about. They put this deer fence directly on the property line. I mean, they split the line right down the whole length. It's 1,400 feet of fence. Well, probably not because they're off the road, maybe 200, so probably about 1,200 feet of fence. Then they split the property line right on the property line. When they initially started this, I went up to Miss Bird, and she'll deny it because she's not a very truthful person at times.
Okay.
But I went up to there, and I'm not making an accusation, but it's been my.
Well, sir, if you could just limit it to,
Right,
yeah,
all
to
right,
the point you're
sorry.
making.
Hey, Ron, Mr. Cucchiaro, I'm
point
trying
I'm
to
making-
not interrupt, but I do have to defend my clients, so.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Gavin, I have the floor right now.
Well,
not
okay,
you.
first of all, you address each other through the chair. Do you have an objection, Mr. Gavin?
Yes, I so far we're listening to everything that's being said, but it's not fair to accuse either of my clients of not being truthful. There's no evidence
Well,
of that.
we addressed that. He's
All right,
moving on.
I'm grateful.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I apologize for that. Now, let's get back to our fence line that they put right on the property line. I would like to know, this is a 7-foot tall wire fence. Now, when this fence gets knocked over, now I have other photos. I have thousands of photos of my backyard. I mean, I don't know how to attach them to your Zoom thing here. And maybe my son, who will probably be testifying after me, I'm not sure. How are they going to maintain that fence? Let's say that fence gets knocked over by a tree and falls on my property. How are they going to maintain it? Are they going to maintain it by trespassing? Do they have, I mean, they're on the property. I put up a fence there for Mr. Johnson, who's south of my property. When I put that fence line up, I asked the township, I said, can I put the fence up on the property line? They said, absolutely, you can. They said, but how are you going to maintain it? Was their question to me. I said, you know what? You're right. So what I did is when I put up my 6-foot stockade fence, I put it on the plan as being off my property line, on my property, 1 foot on my property. So During Hurricane Sandy, I'll give you a prime example. A branch fell on that fence, broke that fence. I had to replace a panel on that fence. I did not have to trespass on Mr. Johnson's property to repair my fence because I had that 1 foot line on my side. So I went there and repaired my fence without disturbing Mr. Johnson's property. All right? They cannot do any maintenance on that fence. They cannot do anything without having to enter my property, which is, as far as I'm concerned, that's my sanctuary. Not only did they take away my privacy, not only did they take away my sanity at this point, after the past 10 years, it's been nothing but a constant change over there. Now I see constant flow of traffic going back and forth into that property. I don't know what's going on back there, but I recently found out that it's for homeschoolers. I had no idea. This is crazy. I mean, what is their next intent? What is the next thing they're going to come to you and say, we just didn't understand what was going on?
Well,
So I think we're getting a little off topic here of the
But
application.
that's a different topic altogether for a future. Whatever.
So, Mr. Caroline, you've made some statements and some questions. I think let's let Mr. Galvin and his clients and team answer it. I think one overall area that you've discussed is what is the buffering between your property and the subject property? So, Mr. Galvin, if you
That's
could.
not the main concern.
Well,
I mean,
before
concern is
we
that they
proceed,
took out the
sir,
buffer
hold on
that
1
was
minute.
supposed to be afforded.
Eileen, Megan's looking to get back in the meeting.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So sorry about that. Mr. Galvin.
Jeff, can you help me out with the fence?
As far as I know, the fence is on the property.
And that's where it's supposed to be, Jeff?
There's no requirement to put it any set distance off a property line, but the fence is within the property.
Okay.
The fence is on the property line.
Well, this is the
On the
applicant's
line.
opportunity to respond. So let's let the applicant respond in the way that they feel is appropriate. Is there anything else you'd like to place on the record, Mr. Galvin?
No.
Okay.
No, I think the neighbors got concerns, but the board will have to weigh them. We think our case stands on its merits.
Hey, Mr. Catalfano, so we understand your position with regard to, what you feel about the merits. We understand what you said about the fence and the buffering. They've responded. The board will evaluate it. Is there anything more that you'd like to either ask
Well,
or
I would
testify
like to
about?
know, did the board receive the letter that I sent to Eileen earlier this year?
Well, it doesn't matter about letters. It matters about.
Well, it matters because there's pictures involved in there that shows them filling in this swell. I mean, the wetlands concern is a huge concern. of mine.
Yeah, I'll object to
And the
that.
removal of the natural buffer. I mean, look, they want to plant arborvitaes there. Arborvitaes is not natural. I want oaks, mature oaks. I want the ground cover. I want everything restored back to the way it should.
All right, so let's.
And the elevation. I
All right,
saw
Mr.
Mauser Engineering out there doing elevations, all right, for them while they were filling this. No, it's
Mr.
not.
Galvin, if you could.
Do we have an engineered
Okay,
report on the
Mr.
runoff
Catalfano,
from
let's
the
let's
effect
deal
of
with
the filling in of
Mr.
this land
Catalfano.
and how it affects the adjacent properties?
Mr. Catalfano, you raised the issue regarding wetlands, and Mr. Galvin wanted Mr. Carr to address that. So let's listen to Mr. Carr.
Jeff,
address
can you
the
confirm that there are no wetlands there?
That's correct. We're not aware of any wetlands on the
You
property.
better look at your own wetlands map because it does extend onto that property where they clear cut the land and filled it in.
Yeah.
It is on my map. It's
Well,
got to be on your map.
We can provide, Mr. Cucchiaro, we can provide as a condition of approval proofs that we previously supplied to the board. I'm
Was there an
absolutely.
LOI or
categorically-
an absence presence letter or something?
Yes.
We actually,
Go ahead,
I
go ahead,
said we
Rosemary. Well, you
we
gotta be sworn
actually-
in. Wait, you gotta be sworn in.
Who's speaking?
Rosemary, she's one of the other
Okay.
client.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
yes,
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Rosemary
Bird, or Osemarie, last name Bird, Bird.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, a couple of things I can state. First of all, if we'll start at the very first planning board meeting, it was actually the planning board that suggestion that we turn the houses facing each other, which also faces the right of way, that because it was safer to have one driveway, one roadway, leaving, exiting, entering and exiting the property instead of having three for three properties that were there. So that was a safety issue. And the houses, the lots were long and thin. So they suggested that we turn the houses face each other because they would fit better on the property. That was there. Another thing is the fire chief himself has actually been here to the property. He's examined the gate and the length of it and everything. Fire trucks have been on the property already and turned around, no problem. He has no issues with the gate or the length or any of that. And they also put on both houses, they put notes on it in case we ever had to call them for a fire, that it warns them about the gate and everything. It's already been taken care of. As far as the wetlands, we had a wetlands management plan test, whatever, and I have a letter stating that there is absolutely no wetlands on the property.
Great job. Great job.
Okay.
Catafano, anything else?
Well, I disagree with Mrs. Bird, but now what about the buffer that was supposed to remain after the second planning board meeting?
What's the status of the buffers, the required buffers, Mr. Galvin?
All right. On the second planning board meeting, Mr. Califano was unfortunately mistaken. The requirement was actually 20 feet wide on his property for 100 feet. Unfortunately, when I went to go mark off the area for the tree cutters to do the rest of the property where we're now farming, there were actually, the requirement was to leave the existing vegetation as it was within that 20 foot by 100 feet. Unfortunately, there were no trees in that 20 feet by 100 foot area. The agreement that I came up with from Matt Howard, what is he, the land use officer?
Head of the community services.
Was that as a compromise, we would plant the 7 arborvitaes in that area. I actually went ahead and did 10 because I got them, I got a good deal on those. That's all I can say about that.
Well, I'd like to say about those 10 arborvitaes, they're all dead, so they're not doing any good. So, I mean, that was a joke and an insult to me.
Tell them they're not dead.
They're not dead, and that was the best that I could do. I mean, that's what I worked out with the township.
Well, Mr. Dahman, you obviously could have done a lot better because you spend a lot of money in clearing that whole area out pretty well.
Okay.
So, I mean, the best you could do was minimal. And
We're not
that's
going to
what-
argue,
Yeah,
Mr.
we're not
Chairman.
gonna have an argument about this, of
No.
what could be done. Is that anything else on your end? Anything else you wanna?
Mr. Chairman, we're done.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Galvin. Mr. Catafano?
I am done at this time. I'm going to stay on the meeting. I am sure there's other people that may have something to say.
Okay, thank you for your time. I'm looking in the, I'm assuming this is your son, Michael? Looks like he's got his hand raised.
Okay, is he on?
He is.
Okay, do you swear, unmute yourself, Michael. Okay, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
And can you please state and spell your name and give us your address?
My name is Michael Califano, MichaelCatalfano. My address is 485 Newton's Corner Road.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Catafano.
My concerns are more or less just kind of clarification on why we weren't informed of there being no trees within that 20 foot by 100 foot long buffer that was agreed upon the last planning board meeting, in which my father had stated previously. Because one of the concerns that was brought up as well during that planning board meeting was that by cutting down that, by providing us that 20-foot by 100-foot long buffer was to provide us privacy from looking in our backyard into the commercial property, which is now has been compromised. So I'm wondering why we're only now just getting like these arborvitaes, which are really tiny trees. And like said, if you look at the elevation of the place, it's kind of in a swell. It's kind of at the bottom of a hill. So it really provides zero privacy to our backyard. So I'm just wondering why that wasn't kind of clarified up to us. Why weren't we involved? You know, I'm sure we could have probably came up with a compromise, you know, considering that it is for our property that it was supposed to be neighboring for. And the fact that that buffer is not even provided a little bit. Even the natural vegetation that was originally there would have spanned at least 4 to 5 feet tall, because we have that same exact natural vegetation in our property that spanned over originally. So.
Okay, you have anything else, Mr. Catalfano?
Also, I'd like just to, again, about the house orientation, that is just poor planning by the engineers. That 50-foot utility it's a utility easement. It's not a road. So technically the front of your house is to the front of the road. If they choose to have the front of their house where their garages are to that utility easement should then and therefore become a road. And then I think we would all be in agreement that then, yes, there's your front of your property and then your other side is a side yard. But as it stands right now, by zoning and normal code use, that is not the case. And it's not a corner lot either, because a corner lot would require 2 intersecting roads meeting at a 90. So,
Mr. Galvin, I kind of need some clarification after listening to everyone speak. Is there a request tonight to change any of the buffering requirements from any prior approvals? Not
No,
saying it's a conservation easement or not, but in terms of, you know, the location and, you know, species or you know, things like that?
we're not we weren't seeking any of that. What
Okay, all right.
We're, as I said earlier, the only thing that I think we're doing is we're ratifying the 8-foot high deer fence. We're not constructing anything at this time. We're just making it so that if we want to utilize the side yard area, we can, like a normal.
And so then I just want to be, again, for
And
my
I think
own,
that might have been the intent of the board initially, but it was never spelled out.
I just want to make sure again that I have it clear for when we're drafting a resolution that any buffer requirements from the previous approvals will remain. That's not anything that's being changed or modified tonight, even if you
Right.
get an approval.
Right, we're not
Okay.
seeking relief.
Okay,
We're not seeking relief.
all right, thank you.
Oh, no, we're not talking about the conservation. The conservation easement is the thing that we're looking for change on.
And that's not the
But
area.
it's going to be a
though,
farmland buffer instead of a conservation.
That's not what Mr. Catalfano was referring to.
No, he's talking about this area where what we're saying is there was a thought process that there were trees in a certain location and there weren't. So the compromise was put in plants. So we did. So if the board needs us to make those plants bigger or add 1 or 2, tell us and we'll do it. But I think at this point we were looking for just a ratification of what we're doing and permission to do, you know, to treat the front yard as a side yard.
Well, the way that I look at it is that whatever those requirements were, they remain with regard to the buffers. And
Yeah,
the
I
decision
agree with
tonight
that.
is limited to whether we feel there needs to be a conservation easement or you want it sort of just retermed, not a conservation easement to the farmland buffer and
the other
permission to have the
thing, Ron,
fence.
the other thing I think is important is the neighbors are referring to the backyard. The 7 acres is a farm, and at some point there are farmland act rules that apply to that. So, you know, just the houses are problematic because they've been turned, and that creates a bit of a problem for us. But
all right. Well, I just wanted to kind of narrow the scope and what it was that was seeking to be changed tonight versus what remains the same from the original approvals. And you've helped to understand that. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I just happen to have also the paperwork here. I have the deed of the utility and access easement, and it also says right of way, common driveway. can
Well,
put-
I don't care what that says, to tell you the
Right.
truth. Whoever drafted it, but it's an easement.
Right, but I'm saying it is also a
Mhm.
right of way. It says it on.
I don't think it's a right of way.
It's
By definition, it's not.
Rosemary, listen
Yeah.
to Dennis.
Okay,
Mr. Cucchiaro is more than a planning board attorney here. He is one of the experts in the state on the issue. And no matter what the document says, I'm going to tell you that I would defer to his knowledge.
okay.
But essentially for your purposes, it's just what you call it. The rights associated with it are what they are. But I don't think
For us,
that's,
it's a street.
yeah, right. All right, so I'm square with everything, Mr. Chairman. I understand everything now.
Got it. Michael, do you have anything else?
Nope, I do not.
All right, thank you. Eileen, it looks like we have Thomas.
Yes, give me 1 second.
Is he on?
He's coming on.
Okay. Just let me know.
Yeah. Seems to have disappeared.
Okay. Do we have anyone else, Eileen?
It's Christopher again.
Up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Hands now down.
Okay. Why don't we give it a moment or two
Hands back
to
up.
see,
Hands
to
back
see
down.
if Thomas comes back. All right. Whatever you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it for the public at this time. I think we heard everything from Mr. Catalfano, to be honest.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yeah, Rob, what's up?
with all the comments and testimony, and I sort of kind of forgot, I just want to clarify what the original issue was, just so I am square on understanding it.
Sure.
The easement that's intended to be reclassified from a conservation easement to a farmland easement is actually on the north side of the property, not at the lower property boundary. And as far as I understand it, if it is in fact a conservation easement by the state, it really doesn't matter what we call it for township purposes. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, the most that we can do is to say, as a planning board, we don't see the need for it to be a conservation easement, but if the state is the beneficiary of the conservation easement, they may find that to be persuasive at best, but our determination doesn't have the legal effect in and of itself of reclassifying it, but it may be persuasive to the state.
I just had a question, Mr. Galvin, and we heard from obviously the neighbors, and seems to be a relationship between Miss Bird and the Catalfanos. But if the board were to act favorably on this application, would your client, I know they've already made an attempt with the arborvitae plantings. We keep hearing privacy over and over and over. Would they be open to some type of a little more effort into giving them some privacy buffer with the planting of larger trees or shrubs or bushes, just to give them maybe a better comfort level and that sense of privacy that they felt they were losing?
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, I originally wanted to put, instead of a solid wood fence that's there, I wanted to put a living fence there of all trees, which would have been much taller, because actually the 6-foot wooden fence doesn't give him any privacy. When I'm in my kitchen and I look out the window, I can see right over that fence into his backyard. So originally I wanted to do trees, but now I've already spent $5,000 to put that fence in. I don't have money to do anything additional. Now I'm on Social Security. I cannot do anything more.
Fair enough.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Rob.
are they discussing the buffer area, which would actually be between two principally residential uses?
Yes.
The buffer that they're talking about, the restriction on, and Mr. Galvin can testify to it, is where the farmland abuts their own lots.
That's the, yeah. Yeah, and that's where we put the arborvitae's in the corner there, right where the farm begins. It's right there that we put the arborvitae's. But you don't need a buffer from a farm activity.
Well, to be clear, that's not true in Howell Township. Howell Township has a 50-foot right to farm buffer that if someone was developing adjoining to a farm, this town requires. In addition, this town requires a 50-foot perimeter buffer on residential subdivisions, major subdivisions. This was a minor subdivision, so one was not imposed. So to answer your question, Mr. Seaman, where lot line abuts lot line that is not the farm, there is not a buffer. And that was the reason for that.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else from the board? Questions, professionals, comments, questions, anything else? Seeing none, Mr. Galvin, closing statement?
I don't know what to say. I thought that this was a relatively simple matter. I don't have any great zoning wisdom here. We're really throwing ourselves on the mercy of the board. We think that what we're asking for is sensible, even though the neighbors don't seem to agree. And we're two houses and a farm. I mean, if I didn't know what was going on here, I would be thinking we're running a bar or we're building a warehouse. So it's what I'm going to offer you is that we'd like to make a better utilization of the property. We'd like to use that big distance on the side of our house for some sensible uses related to our house and to the farm. And I think the easement thing we'll have to work on even after you say yes to it. And I think the deer fencing is necessary because if we're growing things, we need to keep the deer out. Well, my client believes it's very difficult to see what we're doing.
You can't even see it from 5 feet away.
All right.
Okay.
Because the deer fence is
Why?
is wire. It's not, you would look right, you'll see through it. The deer can't get through it, but it's not really visible. So it's not a buffer, but it does block the deer.
Okay. So what we're voting on today, just so everybody's clear, because there's been some questions, it's the removal of the 50-foot wide conservation easement on the northern property boundary. The installation of an 8-foot tall fence. And that's it, correct?
Well, you should say deer fence, because it wouldn't be just, we're not talking about a board on board 8-foot high
8-foot
fence.
tall deer fence, correct.
Yeah.
So at this time, I will entertain.
Let me just, and that we should have the right to use the front yard setback as a side setback.
Correct.
The uses and on a corner lot. So the same way it would be treated on a corner lot. So we won't be putting things very close to the roadway, but whatever the rules are for a corner lot, that's what we'd like permission to do.
Okay, Ron, anything else on this from your end?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Nick, I have a question.
Sure. Megan, is that you?
Yeah, I have a question. This is not a corner lot though, correct? Just for my own clarification.
It's not a real corner lot, but it's a real corner lot. This right away, the easement would be a street. Then it would be. The way we're living with it, that the front doors of the houses face the easement as if it were a street. And that's why we're asking for that. And that's why we're treating it like a corner lot, because we're respecting the fact that we're really abutting two streets or the easement and a street.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I will entertain a motion.
Yeah. Entertained a motion.
Well, the code, the front yard is the front of the house.
So if it's a motion to approve, it would be a motion to approve amended minor subdivision approval with ancillary variance relief And if it's in denial, it's just motion to deny.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll make a second.
Mr. Greenfield with a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talente,
Yes.
Mr. Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Councilman Gager,
Yes.
Mr. Kyle,
Yes.
Mr. Mercer,
Yes.
and Chairman Husser.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I have to get off mute. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and sorry for the inconvenience of this hearing.
Mr. Galvin, thank you. Ms. Byrd, have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Leaving.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, that was the final application for this evening. I know Paul's not here. Is there a master plan update?
There's no master plan update, but I do want to bring something to the councilman's attention. Mr. Gazer, I know that we are working on the farmland element. I'm not sure whether the budget is lining up, but I am making a strong recommendation that we look at the utility plan, especially as it relates to electrical and gas services around the site. With some of the projects that are coming up, with the push for more electric vehicles, I think there's going to be a lot of need to understand what is our utility limits in the town. And I think our master plan element especially is very weak in regards to the electrical capacity that the utility company has available to us. And I would like to take some time to entertain looking into that. And I'd like some feedback from the council, please, and the town manager.
I just noted that we have a budget meeting coming up. And I think we have a master plan committee meeting coming up too. So I'll bring that up at the meeting and I'll get back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Councilman. Ron, I believe you said no executive session this evening?
No executive session, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
So moved.
So moved.
All right, everybody have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.